It's an opportunity to be here among friends, to be able to discuss and strategize and think about future of my country as well as the future of the region and future of our cooperation. I had several very interesting meetings already today. We'll continue with other meetings tomorrow, but let me tell you that we are in a very dynamic process where Georgia has clearly chosen and expressed its European and Euro-Atlantic aspirations, and being together here with friends and with people who know a lot about Georgia and can think about Georgia. I am happy that we are in this very sincere discussion. Let me start with the fact that here I am together with my colleagues from the three main parliamentary political groups. This is the ruling party, Georgian Dream. This is the oppositional party of UNM, and this is the oppositional party of Free Democrats. And having being non-partisan as myself, we all here agree on the importance of European and Euro-Atlantic agenda for Georgia, and we all agree on the fact that Georgia has to make clear and firm steps in this direction. In this context, let me tell you that we are working quite actively on the tool that has been given to Georgia some 2 years ago with the free trade agreement and the association agreement. These issues have become of a primary importance of political discussion as well as reforms for Georgian political spectrum. The government has been successful enough to introduce the reforms that are linked to these agreements, as well as the government has been successful enough in basically complying with all the requirements of the visa liberalization process. At the same time, we are in front of a very important challenge of the upcoming elections in October. 2 days ago, I've sent a decree on appointing these elections on 8th of October. And today the government agreed with this decree, and it will be counter-assignated on the 8th of June. That is giving Georgian political parties quite a long and predictable election campaign opportunities for 4 months. During these 4 months, we have to overcome the main challenge that is currently in Georgia, which is to bring citizens to the voting booths, because unfortunately there is quite a number of undecided voters in my country, and I think that this is one of the serious challenges for these elections. So during these 4 months, we have to keep a very clear, a very fair, and very constructive election campaign, and I count very much on our friends and partners that the monitoring missions that will be that we call for Georgia will be long-standing and will be targeted on detailed scrutinized oversight of the electoral process. In this context, I would also mention that this will be the elections where we will have also a serious part of elections will be a competition among the pro-Western political parties as well as Western skeptics. This process will be going parallel to the Warsaw Summit. This process will be going parallel to the visa liberalization process, and definitely these outcomes of these processes, of these international processes, will be reflected on Georgia. We very much count on successful elections, on successful developments of Georgia's European and Euro-Atlantic integration, and believe that at the end of these elections we'll have a much more firmer democracy, much more firmer democratic process, and a step forward on Georgia's path that has been chosen neither by during my presidency, nor the presidency of previous president, nor even the presidency of before presidents, but has been chosen by my nation and by my society long before that. This year is a year of 25 years of the regaining of independence of Georgia. We have celebrated 25 years of independence just a couple of weeks ago, and we are thankful for all our friends and allies that have celebrated this important jubilee together with us. I've noted that 25 years ago, we have become independent, but it's our ultimate goal now to become free, and freedom means really serving the needs of your society and your country. I also nominated this year as a year of a European state because I do believe that freedom of Georgia politically will be expressed in building a European state and European political institutions. Let me once more thank you for this great opportunity to meet with you, and I guess it would be more productive to move to questions and remarks and discussions. Thank you.
Merci infiniment, Président. Je tiens tout d'abord à saluer la présence du président Margvelashvili au sein de la Commission d'affaires étrangères. Je crois qu'il est essentiel d'avoir un dialogue à la fois sur les relations étroites entre l'Union et la Géorgie, mais aussi sur les défis communs que nous devons soulever. Et je voudrais également profiter de cette opportunité pour exprimer mon soutien pour la libéralisation des visas par l'Union européenne pour les citoyens géorgiens. Je crois que l'approfondissement de nos relations doit se faire à travers une connaissance mutuelle et à travers toutes sortes d'échanges, et la libéralisation des visas pourra effectivement faire possible cet échange. Il est d'autant plus important de faire ce pas très rapidement que la Géorgie a rempli les critères formels demandés et le pays a démontré tout au long des négociations sa détermination à se rapprocher de l'Union. Il ne faut pas rater cette opportunité et renverser la tendance dans le pays. Le président, comme l'a dit le président, il y a maintenant un conflit entre les pro-Ouest et les adversaires de ce rapprochement. Ensuite, je voudrais mentionner l'intérêt que nous portons aux élections à l'automne et au bon déroulement de ces élections. On espère bien que les incidents violents ne vont pas se reproduire, et je me permets de suggérer, pourquoi pas, l'idée d'un pacte de non-agression entre les acteurs politiques. C'est quand même un geste minimal d'éviter tout acte de violence de tous les côtés. Et je crois que ça sera un bon signe pour le respect des libertés fondamentales, d'autant plus qu'on a eu des incidents qui concernent certains politiques et nous sommes parfois très préoccupés par la possibilité d'une politique libre pour certaines de nos des forces politiques géorgiennes. Enfin, je voudrais soulever l'importance du dossier de l'OTAN, parce que le président a mentionné le fait qu'actuellement, il y a aussi la réflexion dans le pays sur le sommet qui va se tenir d'ici quelques semaines à Varsovie. Et je voudrais savoir quelles sont vos attentes, Monsieur le Président, non seulement pour la libéralisation, mais aussi pour l'OTAN. Merci.
Your Excellency, Mr. President, first of all, I would like to welcome you here in AFET Committee. And I will not speak too long. I think the majority of AFET Committee, and I hope the majority of the European Parliament, are in favor of Georgia, and the majority of members of the European Parliament are in favor of free visa regime with Georgia. Because, dear colleagues, we do not have any other state from third countries as Georgia with such high percentage of supporters of our ideas, of ideas, its ideas of democracy and our true values. Of course, Georgia is not an ideal state because there are no ideal states in the world. But we have to stress this willingness of this country to cooperate more closely with the European Union. And thank you once again, Mr. President, for coming.
Thank you, Mr. President. Also in name of the ECR Group, a very warm welcome here in Strasbourg. We have a lot of sympathy for your country, for your people, and you were able to fulfill the visa-free or the visa liberalization action plan despite the tensions, despite also the provocation near your border lines. Of course, we all look forward to next elections, and we hope that they will be a real step forward to real democracy. You will agree with me if I say that the pre-election environment, though, is characterized by political tensions. Nothing abnormal about political tensions in democracy, except, of course, when they are accompanied by intimidation, by violence, as it has also occurred. So this is a concern. There is also the case regarding the ownership of Rustavi 2, which is ongoing. So my first question there would be, what are the measures taken to ensure the transparency of the judicial case of Rustavi 2? And the second question about electoral reform, which was promised after the elections in 2012. There was a special interfractional group created to reform the system, transition from a majority system to proportional one. Now, it will not be, the reform will not be finished. I know that the recent legal committee of the Parliament of Georgia hasn't supported the project of the so-called German model of a new electoral system. So what is the exact state of play of the electoral reform now? Will it be possible for us to consider this transitional model that you will use at the upcoming elections in Georgia to be effective, to be fair? Thank you.
Do you know that the trust of the Georgian people in its legal system is very, very low? And so please bear in mind that we are very worried indeed by the future of Rustavi 2, which is an independent TV station, and it's critical of the government action, but it has to have freedom. And I'd like to thank you as well for the wonderful welcome we had when the ALDE Foreign Affairs meeting went to visit you in Georgia. But I'd like to now get on to the second question. The Nagorno-Karabakh in '91 declared unilateral independence and decided that it didn't want to be in Azerbaijan. So, and the Ossetia Assembly has done the same thing. So we've got two regions outside the control of their government, and there's an extra thing, and that is in the Minsk agreement there is a priority given to self-determination over, and that's more important than territorial integrity. And so because of that, there's been a very dangerous process that's open, not just for stability and the recognition of borders, but also for the crucial point, which is that Armenia, which is a precedent for Ossetia, and both of them are a precedent for Crimea. And then you've got the Minsk agreement, how would you deal with this? How do you see this situation?
Mr. President, I also want to welcome you, the chance and the opportunity to have a free and frank exchange of views with you on several issues. And my colleagues already mentioned the question of the judicial and legal reforms in your country. So if you can explore a little bit more where we are in this relationship, could be very helpful for understanding also here in the House what are the current developments. Second question, you mentioned also the implementation of the free trade agreement and the association agreement, where the free trade plays a significant role. So how you judge for the changing of the social life in your country, the implementation of the FTA plays a role. And thirdly, the developments in your and also in our neighborhood, in particular the developments in Syria, Turkey, Iran, Iraq, needs also a more broader international cooperation. So how you want to use your weight in bettering the relationship with the Russian Federation, because without the Russian Federation we will have here big problems in dealing with these challenges. So where we are here. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much, and welcome, President, to come here to our Parliament. I must thank you and congratulate you for what you have done quite recently, which is that you didn't sign the law on the Constitutional Court amendments, but you wanted to rely on the international expertise by the Venice Commission and others. And I think this was an extremely good sign of some of the most problematic elements in the questions of judiciary, as I can perceive it. I would like to ask you also a little bit more about the question of the visa liberalization now. I believe our rapporteur, Mr. Mamikins, is right when he says that the majority in the European Parliament is going to vote in favor. And it seems to be unfortunate that somehow now Georgia is a little bit of a hostage of our discussion on Turkey, maybe also on Ukraine. But I believe that your country really has fulfilled all the requirements that are needed. So perhaps you could explain a little bit how you see the criticisms and concerns coming from some EU member states concerning the visa liberalization. I understand that there are some concerns on crime in Germany, maybe in France as well. Lastly, we can see that the EU is quite rightly investing a lot of support to the reforms in Ukraine. For instance, we have a 100% strong advisory mission in Kiev with the best experts that we can find. So would you see that Georgia could profit from something similar? Do you feel that you get enough support and that is helpful what you already get?
It's clear that Georgia is a strategic partner in the European neighbourhood policy context, and authorities are making efforts which we appreciate in order to bring about democratisation and the consolidation of democracy in the country. The European Union is fully aware also of this commitment, and we can see concrete examples such as the visa policies. As rapporteur on visa liberalisation, I would like to say straight away, I was rapporteur on various files, and my position was always very clear. I'm in favour of policies of visa liberalisation for the EU, because when we talk about visas, you should also always remember who we're talking about and who's at the centre of this policy, and that is our citizens of Georgia in this case. And it's important today to send out a clear message to them, a clear and positive message. The visa policy is something that I see to be a tool as well. It's a strong instrument to promoting contacts between peoples, and it's also an instrument which does contribute to economic and cultural ties, but and this is what's very close to my heart, that is to see the visa policy as a tool for strengthening political dialogue in a certain number of areas. That allows not just to bring about reforms, but also to demonstrate that the reforms underway have positive consequences and are then sustainable reforms. So this leads me to my main question, which concerns this enshrinement on the long term. President, could you tell us which, according to you, which reforms carried out in the context of the visa dialogue have been the most beneficial and which will have the positive long-term consequences, both for Georgian citizens but also for relations with the European Union? And finally, I would like to join those who have given you this message today that human rights, freedom of the press, everything related to the reform of the judiciary, these are all part of the criteria. They're not so technical, but they're just as important in the dialogue we have with your country. And I draw attention to the fact that it's important that the authorities send out messages that are as positive as the ones we've received so far, and we'll be following progress with a great deal of interest. And thank you very much.
I think it's very important to stress that from the 4 countries which we have to decide on visa liberalization, I think Georgia is the least controversial one. Because as you said, it did fulfill the 72 criteria. The government did a lot on making this happen. So would you agree that it would be unfair to take this decision after the 8 October election? And the question to you is, are all political parties in Georgia fighting to make this visa liberalization happen as soon as possible, or is there a division there? And the second thing, recently we saw the beating up of some high-level UNM politicians. I think it's very sad that after 3.5 years, this is still the polarization in the country. In this respect, how do you see the coming months? And also your predecessor, Mr. Saakashvili, said he will return for the elections to Georgia. What will be your message to him? Are you welcoming him, or will we get a different welcome? Thank you.
Mr. President, welcome once again to the European Parliament. It's good to be personally acquainted with the tendencies and policies in the European institutions and especially in the European Parliament. I really commend your personal position concerning the amendments, supposedly amendments to the law on constitutional law. Keep strong. Do not give up. I mean, the reform of judiciary is very important. I mean, once you slip over, I mean, will be no end for those mistakes in future. And secondly, Mr. President, Georgia is in a pre-election period. It's important to respect the rights of everyone in the country. The incident in Kortsheli is something which we are worried about. I mean, please, enforce your law and order institutions in order to observe all and complete rights of opposition. Can't be democracy with no opposition rights and rule of law on the ground. Thank you.
You said, Honorable Mr. President, that you are here with friends. Be sure you are here with friends. Therefore, allow me one question, and this is a question of friend. European Court of Human Rights is soon to rule on cases of the former Prime Minister and Secretary General of the main opposition party, Vano Merabishvili, as well as another UNM leader and former Tbilisi mayor, Gigi Ugulava. As you remember, OSCE, as well as the Council of Europe Parliamentary Assembly, have said that their detentions were politically motivated. Should you confirm these views? Will you, as the head of the state, respect its ruling? This is my question.
Thank you, Mr. President, for being here with us. I am one of the people who think that indeed the visa liberalization should happen and not have Georgia being hostage of any other circumstances or neighborhood situation. But it would be really very important to have your perception on how you are improving on the dealing with the problems with the selective justice we've seen in the past, and as well the media freedom. The Rustavi question has already been asked by some of my colleagues. Regarding the elections, I'd like to echo the point that other colleagues have already stated, that indeed we hope that polarization is normal in elections, but violence and organized violence, thugs, that is something that we hope won't happen. And finally, what is your perception, because there have been questions about indeed criminality, namely criminality linked to cyber and financial instruments. The Bitcoin seems to be quite popular in Georgia, and there are concerns about the instrumentalization of that for negative purposes.
Yes, thank you, President, and welcome here. We met recently. I was in this delegation that visited your country, which was very insightful. You have noted the broad consensus here with regard to visa. Just to inform you, in the hour before we had Commissioner Hahn, he also said very clearly he is in favor of assessing each and every country of the four separately, and called on us, the Parliament and the Council, to do likewise. Now, the Parliament is clear. Which are the latest noises that you hear from the member states concerned? I would be interested in that. The other issue is clearly also in the run-up to the election. I would not like to see events again like happened in Sukdidi. Recently, I saw then some videos and also photos in this regard. My question, has the justice system, have prosecutor or police recorded the issues and are
prosecutions ongoing. I would like to be acquainted in this regard. And last phrase, next time when I come, I would not like to have to visit partisan or party politicians in prison. I would appreciate that that was not the case in future. Thank you.
We find it a very positive sign that, if it's not mistaken, 75% of people of your country would like to join the NATO, and even 80% are in favor to become a part of the European Union. So in that regard, thank you very much, which is not normal, even in new member states, that free media and human rights have been on the full forecast, and therefore, please don't give up on strengthening these efforts. Thank you also very much for the new cooperation on the organized crime. I think that is very important that things like that can be reduced. And my question to you is, how can the European Parliament, from your perspective, can support this process even further, that you become a member of the European Union? Thank you very much.
I'm coming from the Slovakia, the incoming presidency country, and I also wanted to welcome you very much, like the others. Like colleague Štětina said, that you started saying that you came to see the friends. You can rest assured that you are really among friends, but sincere friends. You heard a lot of questions. The friends who would like to see Georgia going on a democratic way according to the standards which should be the normal way for a democratically developing country which is looking at the future close cooperation or membership along the European way. Concerning the visa liberalization, it sometimes was strange to me that we are asking you. You should ask us. You fulfilled all the technical criteria. Then it is up to us to deliver if we want to keep the credibility. That's how I look at this issue. And of course, the pre-election period is always very, very sensitive, very important. So I hope that we shall not see any turbulences or disturbances in Georgia. Thank you.
First of all, let me reiterate that yes, I'm feeling among friends, and some of the questions that go into details of the political environment in Georgia, I consider this kind of discussions as a part of a friendly joint dialogue where we are moving in one direction, but we want to go into details and nuts and bolts, and more nuts and bolts we discuss, that means that more closer we are developing towards each other. Let me start once more by reiterating that I have an opportunity of being here together with the two opposition leaders and with the leader of the ruling party, and not only that, all of these three parties have their allies in European structures, and they work together with allies and with their friend and sister parties. And I'm happy to reaffirm that on the issue of Georgia's European integration, all three of these parties and their leaders, and I'm feeling in communication with you, have the same position and the same message, and that is an advantage. And I would like to keep this kind of unity of Georgian political spectrum on this very important issue of Georgia's European and Euro-Atlantic integration. So that's a way, it is a response to the question, is there unity on European integration? And absolutely, yes, there is. We have lots of issues to argue with each other, lots of issues to discuss and disagree with when it comes up to Georgian domestic policy, but when it comes up to Georgia's foreign policy, I feel complete consistency on the priorities that have been chosen by my people on this issue. And now let's go to more details about Georgia's internal policy. You are well informed about the veto process that happened just a week ago, and I vetoed the bills on the Constitutional Court. And let me use this floor to thank the Venice Commission, which was extremely cooperative on this case. We really got partnership with a great engagement of our colleagues in Venice Commission, and they were able to form a preliminary position on the bill within several days, basically within a week, and that was crucially important for me because according to Constitution I have only 10 days for forming the position on the veto, and it was crucially important for me that we got the Venice Commission thoughts early enough. We were able to craft a discussion format which was based on the comments of Venice Commission, and the discussion format we said that here are red lines which were described by the Venice Commissions, so let's try to agree upon this to define the law within these red lines. And I'm happy that the Parliament accepted my comments, accepted my veto, and so the bill now is better than it has been before. Had we more time and more cooperation with the Venice Commission, more time to work in more details, I think that we would have a much better legislation. But at least we've been able to work in a very short format in a very good cooperation, and I hope that it's that's how it will continue in future. On the election reform, let me tell you that I started the process on agreeing on the election system a year and a half ago, and I was able to bring all the oppositional parties together with international organizations, together with the experts to the non-governmental organizations on a consensus how the election code, the election system should be changed. And this happened a year and a half ago, and this was a part of my address to the Parliament twice during the national addresses. Unfortunately, the election system did not change. So, what we have now, we have a democratic election system. I cannot say that it's not democratic. It is democratic to have half part of the Parliament majoritarian and half part of the Parliament to be proportional. This is definitely democratic, so the Georgia will run in a democratic electoral system. Yet, I think that it would be a step forward if the system would be changed and agreed upon every player on the field. That didn't happen. Eventually it will happen, but that does not create problems to the very concept of democratic elections in Georgia. On the other hand, I am very concerned about the case that has been several times mentioned here about the violence in Kortskeli. I think that it was disgusting. It is something that we should take care of, and this should not be happening in Georgia. The case was commented by me, by the Prime Minister, by the Chairman of the Parliament. Everyone agreed on the condemnation of this case. The identified participants of the incident have been charged by the prosecutor's office a couple of days ago. So I believe that we, as a political system and as a political leadership, will be able to overcome this kind of shortcomings during the elections, and this is very important that we all unite in this. I think that the idea of putting these principles on the paper and creating some kind of unified document is something that would be helpful. The idea actually was presented by one of the parties, by one of the oppositional parties, the Free Democrats, while my address to the Parliament several months ago, and I hope that this idea materializes and that every party participating in the election agrees upon the rules of the game. At the same time, of course, we have to be very cautious to watch all the incidents and take care of it. As well as, let me reiterate that all of the political leadership, not only opposition, but also the Prime Minister and the Chairman of the Parliament have commented on the standing court case with Rustavi 2. With Rustavi 2 is the most popular broadcasting channel in Georgia, and we had very concrete comments from the political leadership that we would expect that the issues that are of a private court case would not really somehow damage the media environment before the elections. At the same time, we should note that the court system is not neither under the supervision of President, nor under the supervision of Prime Minister or the other high governmental officials. We just have to be very precise when it comes up to media, especially when it is the electoral process. So we are watching the case very carefully. Let me comment on transparency that basically every court case that is running daily is broadcasting during all the time the court case is in session. And we are observing the case very carefully. And we have stated that any kind of violation of the rights of media is inappropriate and should not be happening. Well, let me comment on also on the freedom of expression, on the freedom of political parties and their rights, and their freedom of campaign. I will be very active on monitoring the process. I'll be very active on using all the resources that I have, especially political resources that I have, and the floor that I have to monitor this process. At the same time, I've mentioned this many times before, it is crucial that we have long-standing, very scrutinizing, observing missions in Georgia during these elections, and we are very welcoming not only the election day monitoring, but a much more earlier standing monitoring missions that will be looking at Georgian elections in details. Let me also note that one of my appeals to and hopes to Georgian political system was that Georgian political system would move from bipolar political system when the opponents confront each other and they condemn basically each other to the extremes, to a more European and a more broader electoral formats which would bring several, hopefully 4 or 5 political players into the parliament. It is my impression that that is what is happening right now, and that will on one hand reduce the tension and confrontation between two main political players, but at the same time bring a much more broader choice for Georgian society. And the society right now is challenged by, in many respects, we are living in an occupied state that has been occupied by a very strong neighbor, and that is experiencing these results of this occupation in its day-to-day life, because we have 10% of our population as IDPs. We have ethnic Georgians living on occupied territories, and their rights are very often violated. We have barbed wires put on our land and on our soil which have no whatsoever significance. It's just done for that people don't cross and don't communicate and don't reconcile. We have an environment where a week ago a civilian Georgian was crossing the occupation line. He was attacked by a militant and was killed in front of cameras. So, yeah, the barbed wires are moving, and there is no significance to this barbed wires, just an attempt to try to depress our societies, no matter Georgian citizens, whether they are living on mainland or whether they are living on occupied territories. Let me once more use this opportunity and thank Slovak president, together with whom we just a week ago we have visited the occupation line, and we saw a person there who was 80 years old, and he was left on the other part of the village, and now he has no resources for dealing with his family problems. So this is the reality on the ground. The reality is continued with Russia's continuous effort to create, to imitate some kind of international formats through signing strategic agreements with the occupied territories and then going on with continuing these agreements. And we very much hope that our colleagues and friends here will be very firm on unacceptance of this kind of policy, as well as being very firm on the message that is non-political but is purely humanitarian, that the people from the occupied, who have been expelled from the occupied territories, have a possibility of a dignified return there, no matter how politically we discuss this issue further. We are concerned about the complications and security environment in the region, which has been, unfortunately, become worse. And this is, of course, the Ukrainian war and crisis that has affected the region. This is, of course, the tension in Nagorno-Karabakh. This is part of the tension between Russia and Turkey. Georgia has been a very responsible player in this respect. All our efforts were targeted for stabilization in the region, for developing partnership projects, but not for trying to come to a rational dialogue with every party engaged. But not only that, our men and women in uniform have been very active in trying to secure global peace and security. We've been part of the ISAF mission for years. We are part of the Resolute Support Mission. We are part of the EU-led missions in Central African Republic and Mali. Just a week ago, I filed a new contingent to the Parliament to be approved to engage in Mali, and so I think that we are committing all our scarce resources to this process, and I hope that at some point Georgia will also become not only contributor but utilizer of the global security and stability. And I believe that when we are talking about stability and security in the region, and when we are talking about European security, Georgia is a part of the securing the European security and should be also considered in this discussion, and there is quite an experience that we can share in this respect. On visa liberalization, let me tell you a very clear position that I have. We want to become part of EU, and we want to become part of the European family of nations. And one of the reasons that we want to be here is that we are Europeans by our culture, but also because we very much trust that the rules of the games are here, the ones that are declared and the ones that are observed. And that's why we believe that when we became part of Eastern Partnership and the clear message was given to Georgia and other members that they will get more for more, and we have worked very hard, not only as a government, but as a society, to implement the reforms and to apply to all the requirements. This is something that we will get not as a reward, but as a part of cooperation and partnership around the principles which are declared. And Georgian case will not be lost in other discussions. It would be unfair. It would be in breach of and respect of some of the basic principles that we have committed to each other. On the activities and on issues concerning, finally, on the issues concerning of people who are charged or are under consideration from different political parties. I have discussed this today before, and I can tell you very clearly that this has to be dealt by the Georgian courts, which have to grow in this system, which have to develop in this system. There are politicians that are charged. It is my concern that they not be charged for political reasons, and I commit all my resources to make courts more transparent and more professional. I believe that eventually Georgian juridical system and Georgia law enforcement bodies will build enough trust among Georgian society to be very responsibly to respond to those challenges. Georgian democracy has to grow. One of the most complicated, we discussed this today, one of the most complicated parts of a democratic system is the judiciary, and judiciary is effective when politicians don't get engaged into judiciary, when they keep the line and borders, even when they think that they are right, even when they think that they have the proper solution. The judiciary has to improve by itself. It is my goal to commit more professional lawyers to this system, and eventually I believe that we'll come to the point where the trust for Georgian judiciary within Georgia as well as within our partners will be increased. Thank you.